Sarah Brunwell, the editor of fundoperator.com, and I'm here with Mark Gillan, Head of Product at AJ Bell Investments. Mark is speaking at the Fund Operator Europe Summit later this year, and ahead of that, we wanted to catch up with him to get a little bit of a flavour of what he's going to be talking about. Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Sarah. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So my first question is a big one. What are some of the top priorities when it comes to improving the operational experience when you're looking at kind of adding value for clients?
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. You're right, it's a big question. So hopefully I can cover it. I think for me, a fundamental thing that's happening in our industry is democratization of investment. No longer is it seen as the preserve of huge institutional clients or ultra high net worth clients. It's now very much seen as a democratic industry where you can go onto an app and invest with £10 rather than having to have £10 million. And I think that there are lines now blurring between what I guess I'd call wealth management and asset or investment management. They're all kind of becoming much of a muchness now. There's much more personalization. I think in an era of where everyone's a client of Netflix and Amazon, everyone wants a hyper personalized service when it comes to investment. And so I think the big priority for firms needs to be adapting their operating models and service models to serve that new environment.
That makes sense. And how do you see that sort of operational change improving, retention, speed of service, profitability, and so on?
Yeah, it absolutely will do. To the point where I think if firms don't do any of this, they'll very soon be out of business or they'll be losing business hand over fist. So I think from the back office right the way through to the front, the sales and the investment management functions, everything now needs to be geared towards improving that client experience and towards that personalization that I mentioned. I think if firms are nimble enough operationally to cater to the needs of those clients in that way, you'll get very loyal customers. You will see, I think, like I mentioned before, an element of tailoring. So where you can go on various sites now and get recommendations. You've watched this, so you might like this. I think you're going to see that element of personalization creeping in. And I think the more that customers see that personalization, the more loyal they become. And you can't, as a firm, you kind of build a moat around those customers and you improve retention and profitability that way.
That makes sense. So the direction of travel seems fairly clear. What are some of the challenges in getting there, and how are you guys thinking about solving them at AJ Bell?
I think probably the biggest challenge that I see is what I'd call path dependence. Many firms that are well established in the industry have got very well established operating models and technology infrastructure, which has served them well for a long time and fundamentally still works, still does the job. But I think the more that you layer new bits of technology and new operating processes and things grow, not just arms and legs, but fingers and toes, it gets more and more complicated. That eventually breaks. Mm-hmm. So a challenge for us, and I think for many in the industry, is how to get away from that path dependence. And instead of building on architecture and layering technology systems on technology systems, it's moving away from that, developing new architecture, completely new systems away from those legacy pieces of kit that you've maybe had for 10 or 20 years. And we're very much trying to do that. It's difficult as a long established firm, but we're looking at rolling out new pieces of technology, microservices and app-based delivery and distribution away from our long established architecture to try and serve the needs of some of those clients that I mentioned before.
And obviously there's a lot of, you kind of mentioned all the things that lots of sort of more retail technology brands are doing. There's a lot of kind of options, a lot of innovation, there's a lot of technological development on the table. So how can the fund management industry and fund operators in particular kind of be strategic and make sure that they're picking the right bits of technology and charting the right course for their business and not getting kind of lost in all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question because the strategy can't simply be do everything. You have to pick your battles and, as you say, have a strategic focus. I think that there are two things that I'd probably pick out there. The first one being regulation is a driver of pretty much everything that we do in the industry. But I think more so now than ever, the regulator is very, very interested in our world. Now that investment is seeing as being a bit more democratized, that inevitably brings the risk of more customer harm. And I wouldn't be surprised if the regulator continues to focus very much on retail investment and how that's rolled out to customers. So for firms, I think it's very important to engage with the regulator early and in a very constructive way. Ultimately, the regulations that are being worked on now will be products and services of the future. So it's important for firms to, as I say, engage with the regulator and understand what's coming down the tracks. And then secondly, from a strategic point of view, it's always tempting to complicate things, but ultimately I think as a firm, if you focus on client experience and ultimately what the customer wants and what is going to make things easy for them and make their investment journey as smooth as possible, you won't go far wrong.
Great. Last one from me. I just want to touch on skills a little bit, because obviously the world is changing and the kinds of, all of this technological innovation, the types of things that companies, that fund operators are trying to do is changing. And I just wondered whether you could reflect a bit on like how funds can make sure that they have the right knowledge, skill, expertise level in-house to actually kind of get on board, and the right culture as well, I guess, to kind of get on board with this technological innovation, technological development, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, as much as I would see our firm as a platform and as an investment house, there's an equal argument and an equally strong argument that we're a technology house. And you could probably say that of most investment firms, if I'm honest. They're as much technology houses as they are investment firms these days. And my view would be that you have to think that way. You have to think that you're almost a technology firm that does investment. That's not to say that investment isn't your core mission, but everything around the delivery of our services to customers is technology based now. It's all digital and it will become more digital over time. So there has to be a culture set from the top, I think, that we are a technology industry under a different guise. And I think once you've set that cultural tone at the top, that then percolates to the rest of the firm. Important to get the requisite skills in certain areas. It's important that people around the operational side of the business as well understand the technology. So they're not just sitting there pushing a button and watching a process, that they understand the nuts and bolts. So they're never going to be as skilled as the technologists themselves who put this stuff together, but it's very important that they are skilled enough to understand for when things go wrong and when they are called in to fix processes, they need that knowledge and they need to understand how the technology works to deliver that customer experience.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark. Obviously, you're going to be talking about all these issues in more depth at our conference, and we'll be discussing a whole host of other issues pertinent to fund ops and fund operating teams. And I can't wait to hear more from you then.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time. It was an interesting conversation.